We wanted the Harambee to be a mixture of things. We wanted to share some of our vision and knowledge and our experience with you. We wanted you to meet each other. We think that is really critical. Chicago is famous for being a city of silos. So we wanted to mix it up. We wanted to share our knowledge. We wanted to get you guys to meet each other across the city and across your issues and neighborhoods. And then we wanted to share some experience with you, some things that have worked that you'll find useful in your work. So our first session is about IPOs. What is an IPO? And why might you want to have one in your ward? So we have with us representatives of 3 successful operating independent political organizations. They are from different parts of the neighborhood, different parts of the city. We have representatives of the 12th, 25th, and 35th IPOs. I'm going to just pass the mic down. I'm going to let each person say a little bit about who they are and what their organization does. Then we'll open it up to the floor. So each person can say a little bit about who you are and what your IPO has done. And then we'll do some Q&A.
Hey, how's everyone doing today? Everyone's having a great day. Thank you for coming out. My name is Fernando Martinez. I'm actually part of the 25th Ward IPO. I've been with them for about a year. They have a long history. They started in 1983. They helped Harold Washington get elected. They were part of they started with the 22nd Ward IPO. Then the 25th Ward IPO died down. And then they came back around Bernie Sanders era, helping Bernie Sanders get elected. That's where we started. I've been there with them for about a year. I'm actually their interim executive director. I just, effective Wednesday, I just became the executive director. One of the things that we're working on right now that's been pretty successful is we actually got the Lift the Ban referendum on the ballot for the entire ward. We were one of the first IPO, first organizations to push the Lift the Ban referendum on the ballot, so we can, what many of you heard of Lift the Ban, right? Yeah. Okay, so Lift the Ban. So it's illegal to have rent control in the state of Illinois. So we're trying to lift that ban so we can get some type of rent control, some type of rent stability in the state of Illinois. That's what we worked on. So that's one of our major successes, and we're always pushing for that.
Thank you, Fernando. My name is Billy Drew, and I am the president of the 12th Ward Independent Political Organization.
My name is Jorge. I'm one of the founding members of the 12th Ward Political Organization. I'm a student at UIC studying urban development and public administration, which is essentially policy.
So a little bit about our organization. We started in 2015, December 2015. We came together after the 2015 municipal election in which Chuy Garcia really came out as the progressive choice, and a lot of those volunteers from that campaign, as well as a candidate who was running in the 12th Ward, a guy by the name of Pete DeMay. A lot of the volunteers from that campaign, we really wanted to keep them intact, keep that network going so that we can continue an organization, because we felt that that election really brought to light a lot of issues that were facing the city. And so we wanted to continue something that would be present in each election and throughout, in between elections, right? So that we can do the work that was necessary to bring more equity, racial justice, economic justice to the 12th Ward. The 12th Ward has 3 neighborhoods, Brighton Park, McKinley Park, and the east part of Little Village. So just to talk about some of our successes, we've also, we're part of the Lift the Ban Coalition. We were able to get the rent control referendum, Lift the Ban on rent control referendum on 7 of the precincts of the 12th Ward in Little Village. And it got 80% of the vote, or 80 to 81% of the vote. So that was one of the highest totals for Lift the Ban out of the whole city. So we're gonna continue to do those types of things. I think it's important that people get engaged on a volunteer basis. We're all volunteers. We've never accepted money from any political candidate or political party. We are, totally self-funded, and it's important to try to keep it that way because, that's the essence of independence. And we kind of took our model from the 25th Ward IPO and the 22nd Ward IPO, precinct-based model where we have captains in each precinct, and even starting off at the block level, right? Because I think that's where we really find the true fabric of the community, getting to know your neighbors, getting to know what the issues are. Just recently we took the lead on a campaign around an environmental issue, which was the asphalt plant that came to McKinley Park. And nobody knew about it. Everybody was very concerned. The alderman was the only person who apparently knew about it, didn't bother to do a meeting about it. And so people were concerned because it was right across the street from a park. It is right across the street from a park, very close to a school, and very close to where people live. And the 12th Ward took the initiative to do a public meeting. And from that meeting, we got folks engaged and started a new organization, Neighbors for Environmental Justice, that's going to specifically focus on environmental issues and pollution on the southwest side. So that's another one of the successes that I could say started from the IPO, but it's really about issues. It can be from candidates, right? Because that's how we started, but it's also issues. So my suggestion would be to find somebody or find an issue, talk to your neighbors, and start at the block level, and from there you can start to build and start an IPO yourself. So thank you.
Yeah, so I wanted to discuss a little bit of the successes of the IPOs in particular, and more so some of what we needed to go ahead and get that started. I figured some of that information might be relevant to some of you. So prior to our IPO being started, there was the mayoral election. We had already built up a significant amount of bodies, a good amount of numbers who were mobilized and actively canvassing through the neighborhood, actively campaigning, whether it be on behalf of the local person who was running for alderman against the incumbent, that would be a Pete DeMai, or the mayoral election. So prior to the IPO being started, we had all this momentum that had come about as a result of this election. And I think that going into this next election cycle, that whether it be you just communicating with your neighbor or a couple people on your block or even in your neighborhood, if you guys can carry that momentum forward, obviously we all have I'm sure we're all here because we have an immediate task ahead of us that we want to accomplish. But going forward, if we can carry over that momentum from this next election cycle into something in the future, then that will lay an incredibly strong premise for whatever organization you may feel like starting. And to Billy's point, sometimes it can be hard to rally people or to get people united about something. And so that's where the issue concept comes in. So as of late, we've been going along with this asphalt campaign against the asphalt plant that's moved into the neighborhood. But even prior to then, we've had other campaigns such as Lift the Ban, which is something a lot of people in the neighborhood, as I'm sure in a lot of your neighborhoods, can get behind. And also things like when the ICE raids were starting, Know Your Rights. So as the ICE raids were starting, we went about the Know Your Rights campaign, informing people of how they can protect themselves, of what their rights are, of what to do in certain given situations, and things of that nature. So to close it up or wrap it up on my point, if you guys have a central issue that's concerning you or maybe concerning people of your community, that's a good rallying point, and that the momentum that comes from that or an election can carry over into many other things if you guys work to maintain those relationships and build out. I couldn't say how many new people we've had at meetings in even just the last few months, but it's been over hundreds and hundreds of new people who are learning about our organization and not just learning about our organization, but actively mobilizing and canvassing and going on about it, carrying the message forward of the group. So best of luck to you guys. Maybe there's an issue that is already in your head for your local award, or maybe you guys are going to rally around election. But you got to keep that momentum going forward. And that's how you start to build a coalition and start to have a little bit of success with IPOs.
So my name is Eleanor Anderson. I'm an advisory board member with the United Neighbors of the 35th Ward, which is the IPO in the 35th Ward. We also started after the last municipal election. In our case, it was immediately after the election of our alderman, who is Carlos Rosa, the alderman 35th Ward. And I think that gives us a little bit of a different position than some other IPOs who are working for different policies. They want their alderman to sort of operate in a different way, or they want a new alderman, right? We're in the position of working very closely in coalition with our alderman, and that's a nice position to be in, and I think it does allow us to do some things that maybe a little different from some other situations. So we've done a combination of work around issue areas and then also working on electoral campaigns. In our case, again, because we're happy with our aldermen, most of those has been other kinds of electoral campaigns. So we worked on state rep and state senate races that are in our general area. The 35th Ward touches 5 neighborhoods: Albany Park, Irving Park, Avondale, Logan Square, and Hermosa. So that's a lot of different neighborhoods. There's a lot of different elected officials that are also serving those neighborhoods, and we see ourselves as sort of serving and being comprised of people who live and work in any of those 5 neighborhoods. So we engage a lot of people, for example, around the Kim Foxx campaign. That was something that was a big, I think, boon for our organization as well as for the city. We also worked on some local judicial races. Evie De La Rosa is a judge who we worked to elect, who's really been a wonderful ally to our organization. And then we also have been working on some of these issue areas. Like we also just got a lift the ban referendum on the ballot for this upcoming November election, which we were very excited about to kind of join that effort that's really growing across the city. And we've also endorsed a number of other campaigns that have been happening around the city and even around the nation, like the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, the renewal of Dr. King's campaign from 1968, 50 years ago. We just endorsed the No Cop Academy movement. So I'll let Lenny kind of fill in from there.
My name is Lenny Brody. I've lived in the 35th Ward for over 25 years. I've raised my 2 girls in the neighborhood, and they went to the Chicago public school system. I've been active in electoral politics for quite a while. In our neighborhood, originally the state rep, who is now Will Gazzardi, a progressive state rep, but before him, there was a Green Party candidate who ran, and in a lot of ways laid the basis for Will's victory. We did a lot of work there. I worked with Will, and then of course when Carlos decided to run, me and my wife worked for Carlos. And one of the things I think I'd like to share is the ward organization and independent organization, political organizations, are a place to bring together electoral activity and social movements within the neighborhood and in the city. And I think that's very important, because if you focus mainly on just getting elected, you end up in this electoral morass where most of the people that you're working with on the city council are your enemies, basically. And so you become very isolated. If you work in the social movements and have no connection to the elected officials, you end up, you claim you're pressuring your elected officials, but what you're really doing is begging them to do right. And so a ward organization and an IPO can unite the social movements, the activities in the neighborhood with electoral activity, and have that close relationship so that we make sure that Carlos, our alderman, is representing the needs of the neighborhood, and the electoral activity, because Carlos is an alderman, that's allowed us to stimulate community organizations, that's allowed us to relate to other groupings in the city. So I think the IPO and the ward organizations are a key to transforming the city. That we have to have a combination of social movements and electoral activity The other thing that we try to do, which is difficult, is to politically educate ourselves, to know what our enemy is doing. And one point I'd like to make is that right now in Chicago and in cities all around the country, the movement to gentrify the cities is really a policy of the people who run the country. And they're securing the cities and they're driving out working class people. And we have to understand that's a centerpiece of our fight, and we have to understand how they're operating and how we need to operate. So I think the IPOs are a really good place to discuss all these questions and figure out how we're going to get ourselves organized, politically educate ourselves, so we could actually win and not be fooled by like short-term immediate goals, but really have a long-term plan.
This is some great stuff here, you guys. So I'm just going to hit a few themes that I heard. We're combining electoral and social work. It's back and forth. It's called it's one way it's talking about it is called the Wellstone Way. Paul Wellstone was a United States Senator, but before that he was a history professor, and he talked about a triangle where you've got electoral work, community work, issues work, and you just keep going around the circle or the triangle, educating, activating, educating, activating. So I love that point. I love the idea of holding people accountable. So you're not satisfied with just an election, but the elected official knows that you're there, while keeping them honest, educating people, holding his or her feet to the fire. Can you guys pass the mic and talk a little bit about leadership development? Because that's another theme I heard that seems to be very important to you. Talk to us about leadership development.
Well, I think leadership development is to me is getting young people involved, right? So my dad developed me as a leader. My dad was one of the founding members. He recently passed away, but when we formed the IPO, it was kind of a consensus that I be the president. I don't think I was fully ready to take that responsibility on, but I think a lot of the senior members or senior founders felt that we needed a young person to sort of guide us to where we needed to be, and we'll help them along. And I think I've taken on that challenge pretty well, and I'm trying to pass that on to other young people who are getting involved. And the thing about the IPO is that we've been a presence in the neighborhoods and creating that space. And I think a lot of young people appreciate the fact that we have created a space where they can get politically educated, or we can bring candidates that can talk about what they're about, bring experts in. So when Tom came to McKinley Park and presented on Chicago's Not Broke, that brought a lot of young people out. And so getting those folks engaged, getting them a part of the IPO, and then really giving them roles and developing them. So Jorge's an example, right? Jorge's a little younger than me, but he's been very present in the organization and has stepped up to become a leader. So I think to me leadership development is making sure young people are involved in the process, because we've so often hear that young people are disengaged, they don't vote, but not only do we need to get them to vote, but we need them to become leaders in the IPOs. So.
I honestly feel that me growing up, I grew up in Pilsen, and I had no one really guiding me in terms of like being involved. I was just like living my life as a young man in Pilsen, and it was not until I went to college where I learned about all the injustices that were going on in the world, and that's when I really learned about being a leader and stepping up for my community. And it's great to see that younger people are actually stepping up, because a lot of us didn't know we had options, and now there's so many more options for kids to step up. And it's so important, because they're the ones that are going to inherit the problems that we have right now. A lot of the people running our country right now are the ones making a mess of our country, and they're the new leaders that are going to step up and solve a lot of these issues. So it's very critical that we as older adults start planting the seed and helping them get involved, even at a younger age, 5, 6, 7, teaching them about social justice, teaching them about right and wrong, and then having them be involved, going to rallies, stuff like that, helps them learn about the injustices, and then they become leaders as they grow. They become part of social movements.
I would think about leadership development in our organization in two ways. One is what Lenny was talking about political education and sort of consciousness raising, that I think a lot of us, a lot of people perceive the way the world is as the only way that it can be. I think people have a lot of cynicism, they have a lot of sort of complacency and fear of the possibility of change. And so one of the things that we try to do is engage people's imagination, very similar to the activity we were doing this morning, engage people's imagination in like what is possible, and also then connecting that back to like, why don't we have that right now? And helping people to kind of see that the world doesn't have to be, the world as it could be doesn't have to be the world as it is. And then the other piece of it is more concrete, like what do you actually do in order to get somebody elected, in order to get a referendum on the ballot, in order to win a local issue campaign. And so we have and I'll also just say, like, this is really hard, and I don't feel like we have it all figured out. I don't feel like we've got the silver bullet, and you can just, we fixed it, But I'm happy to share some of the things that we've tried. We call ourselves UN35. So we have some trainings that we have sent folks to for both some of that kind of like consciousness raising kind of stuff. And then we also have a sort of one-on-one system of mentorship where each person who seems to be showing some real interest in becoming increasingly engaged in our organization there's someone in our core leadership group who is watching and paying attention to that person and meeting with them one-on-one on a regular basis and engaging them, continually in both reflecting on their own lives and experience, and again, that kind of like thinking about, why have you had that experience? Like, what might be some of those broad social issues that may have affected you in a very concrete way? Sometimes that's not obvious to people. We don't realize the ways that we have been affected by these systems and structures that are out there. And then the other piece is like inviting people to take on more leadership in a very intentional way. That's rooted in, I know you, I know why you're here and what you're trying to accomplish, and let me invite you into this new role in our organization because I think that it's good for our organization and I also think it's good for you. And so to me, that practice of looking for ways that people's participation and increasing leadership in our organization is both about a larger movement and also about you and your individual path and how you can achieve what you want to do. That's been very powerful for me, to feel like seen by like leaders in our organization and feel like, oh, these people really like believe in me and think I can do more and are inviting me into this role. And I think it's also effective. I think it's so easy for us to get burnt out, right? If you feel like you're always doing it for someone else, at the end of the day, you're kind of like, well, I got a lot of things that I need too. And so being able to make that connection of like, yes, you're doing this for all of us and for the collective, but also you're doing it for yourself. And let me help you make that connection and be strategic in the kinds of responsibilities I ask you to take on based on how I understand your own self-interest in this work.
I have one more thing to say on leadership. So I think that the approach that you guys have had is it seems like a very positive approach, and from what you're saying, it seems like it's been relatively successful. I was going to say, one of the approaches that I think that we've taken in the 12th Ward IPO is just really allowing anybody and everybody to engage. So oftentimes there's people post questions or call to actions, and we typically have a pretty broad spectrum of people who rise to the occasion, whether it be canvassing or phone banking or flyering or whatever the case may be. So I feel like, and this is something that Billy and other senior members of the IPO have helped facilitate, including his dad. They post a lot of calls to action. And on one day or with one campaign, somebody may rise, and another day on a different campaign, somebody else may rise. And so, feeling like I'm somebody who's been with the IPO for a little bit and who's looked up to senior people in the IPO, I feel like they're when they pose questions like who's going to go on canvas for this campaign, or who's going to phone bank, or who's going to research and look into feasible options or solutions for certain problems, that that allows everybody in the IPO to really take control and really manifest what it is that they're going to be adding to the group. And going forward, so I have a friend from the neighborhood who's been homeless, and I've been trying to help him work kind of the social service circuit so he can get himself back to his feet. And oftentimes I find that I'm taking the approach that these guys set forth for me, and that's how do you think you can tackle this problem? What's comfortable for you, or what venue or perspective would you like to tackle this from? And then that's something also that I've carried over into some of the mentoring that I do over at Little Village with young kids. They're entering high school and leaving middle school and stuff like that. So when I try to expose them to different things or make them think about different things, I pose a lot of open questions and call to actions. And I think that kind of leadership, which was shown to me by older people within the 12th Ward IPO, is a really great facilitator for people to rise to action. And because I think that the fact of the matter is that depending on what the subject is or what the issue is, that there's a leader inside of all of us. It just, somebody has to tickle that funny bone so that idea can spark in your head, and so that you can go ahead and start to facilitate the actions of a leader in whatever capabilities that you can. So I think that.
Great. Now, before we turn it over to the audience for Q&A, I'd like to get each of you to give me like 2 or 3 bullet points for like how to start. Do we need a board? Do you need bylaws? Give us a little, reach into your toolbox, and then we'll go to Q&A from the audience.
I think it's important to get a small group of neighbors together and begin talking about what's happening in the neighborhood and what you need, and not go for a big splash right away, but really get yourself a core, because all organizing starts with a small core of people first.
This is hard. Something that we've tried different versions of is what that sort of highest level leadership within the organization should look like. And is it one person? Is it a paid person? Is it a sort of cohort or small cadre? So I think that that's something that you can do different ways, but you want to think about the sort of pros and cons of those different approaches.
I can't help but think that one of the most important things is just rallying points. So whether it be an environmental issue, a community issue, or a campaign or election, if you have something that people are passionate about and that believe in or that want to see come to fruition, that can really help, even if you do start with a very, very small group of people. And it's also obviously important that you don't get discouraged, even with just this really big, find out what's important to you. Some of your neighbors probably have similar sentiments and concerns, so that's what I would say.
Great.
Yeah, I would agree with Lenny. You got to start with a group of people, a core. Find neighbors on your block. You start off more local, and then you could branch off into larger rings. Run for school board. Get to know people at your local school, other parents, and be nimble, because I don't think there's really a playbook for this. I don't really think there's any. I think starting off with bylaws would be a mistake, and trying to go for the whole ward would also be a mistake. I think you need to start the block level, the precinct level, and build from there, and also not be so close-minded and narrow in terms of you can only work with people in your ward. You kind of have to be open and work with anybody that's willing to take something on and help out in the immediate term and offer what they can offer, because this is like I said, there's no playbook, there's no script, there's no set bylaws. So I think that just be nimble and agile and be able to adapt. So
The key to any group is relationship. building a relationship within each other, having the trust and respect for one another. And I think that's where it starts, just having that relationship, that trust and respect for one another. That's where you can start working on building that group of people. Whether it be you meet once a week, start talking about issues once a week, once a month, you start building that relationship with each other. Another thing that Billy and 12th Ward and 25th Ward kind of did is we actually had a social a couple days ago in the 12th Ward. We invited IPOs from around the city. We had Network 49. We had the IPO from the 35th Ward show up. We had Socialist Alternative and DSA show up. So that's a good way to start building, and this is where we can start like IPO building. We could have people from neighborhoods that don't have IPOs start showing up to these socials and start learning from us. Start learning from our experiences with those socials and help the movement grow that way. So that's another good way, like start socializing with other IPOs in other areas and start building the community. And they can learn from us and we learn from them.
That's awesome. Okay, well, questions from the audience? Okay, just pass the mic.
So I'm Claire Duggan from the 19th Ward and I run a local civic organization, so not quite the structure, so I'm curious about, can you give me a sense of what's kind of the size, and it might vary, you know, are you talking about a core group, do you have a larger sense, and how do you keep those people connected? Are you meeting regularly, small groups, large groups, you know, just kind of a sense of what does this look like? And is there any official, I mean, I totally get your point on the no bylaws and being flexible, but do any of you have an official status or structure? Are you 501c4? Are you registered with the State Board of Elections as a known entity? You know, so is there any, or is it just totally grassroots coming together? So any insights would be helpful.
So the 12th Ward IPO is totally grassroots. We're not registered with the state in terms of a PAC or a C4. I believe you really only need to get to that point when you have a certain amount of money in your bank account, and I think that's around $4,000, give or take, $5,000, and we don't have $5,000 in our bank account, not yet. But yeah, I would say our core structure, our core group is around 20 people, and our membership is around 60 to 70, and so I think that's and growing, right? So every meeting we have, every event we have, every social, we're constantly connecting with more people and bringing them into our organization.
So our core group of people is about 10 to 12 people that are consistently going to like, what we do is we set up like steering committee meetings on a consistent like weekly, bi-weekly basis, depending on what's going on, what events are happening, if there's any pending matters that we have to like coordinate, we have those people. And then when we have our bigger general meetings or events, we invite the whole general membership to come and join. It's hard. A lot of people, honestly, a lot of people have families, they have kids, so we have to be aware of that, and we have to respect that, and we just have to ask them, what can you do? Can you go to meetings? Can you door knock? Can you phone bank? What's your capacity to be involved? I think that's key to respecting everyone's time and space.
Yeah, we're kind of on the other end of the spectrum, I would say. We have bylaws, we're a PAC, we have an advisory board that is currently meeting monthly. We have a co-chairs group, which are the co-chairs of each of our committees and campaigns. So we have committees and campaigns. And that co-chair group also meets monthly. And we've also just started a slightly larger than the co-chairs group to actually have weekly phone calls, because we felt like it's just things fall through the cracks if you're not really communicating a lot. And so it can feel like a lot, but that half-hour phone call actually makes things a lot easier than coming back together a month later and it's like, oh, was I supposed to do that? Oh, like, yes. So yeah, we have a lot of structure, and I think that our current structure came about after maybe a year or two of being kind of in operation, and we felt like we needed more, because we were sort of like had new people coming, but we didn't have an ask for them of kind of like a way that they could become meaningfully involved. And we were like, we need more roles in the organization to invite people into, so that they can actually, they want to do something, but it's not clear what they could even do, you know, what that responsibility or role could be. So our structure in terms of our committees, we have a membership development committee that runs our monthly meetings, which are, we sometimes call them membership meetings, but they're really open to anybody, and those are on different kinds of issues. We often work with other organizations to come and be speakers at our monthly meetings to share information. We have a policy committee. I'm the chair of our policy committee, and that is our goal is to really educate ourselves about what some of the policies are that we think that we can and should be pushing our elected officials to push for. Like when we talk about holding our electeds accountable, like accountable to what, right? So our goal in the policy committee is to get clear within our own organization of what it is we're trying to hold people accountable to. And let's see, we have I think fundraising and communications. I mean, really, fundraising is a big task for us. Do we have another committee? We have a number, and just to sort of finish that, so the idea of the structure is that we have these standing committees, and then we also periodically have campaigns, and the campaigns sort of draw from each of the committees, but they're about a specific issue or sort of problem that we're working on. So for example, the Lift the Ban coalition, the Lift the Ban work that we were just doing, we had somebody who was the chair of that campaign, but she was working with our membership development committee, our policy committee, our fundraising and communications committee to get the resources that she needed to make this sort of big push to get these petition signatures happen.
I think also, just to give you a sense, our monthly membership meetings vary from like 20 people to 150. So when the immigration raids were happening, we invited speakers from different organizations, and we had over 150 people at our monthly meeting. Sometimes we're just doing kind of checkup stuff, and we get 20 people. The important thing about an organization is that there's a place for people to flow into when things are needed to be done. And so it's important to keep a minimal structure, keep meeting, keep planning, and trying to figure out where you're going, and then also be available to the community to provide that voice for the community.
A political committee, that's our last committee.
Next question.
Yeah, I'd like to hear some examples on how you go about growing and why, if you do care about how you grow. You talk about socials. I imagine you probably get new membership that way. I'd like to hear some examples of where that next member comes from and how you go about acquiring that next member.
So I can't help but think that your question automatically redirects my brain towards issues. So like I said, most recently we've been dealing with this asphalt plant campaign, and that's something that we canvassed for. We've held meetings about it, and so by going out into the community and talking to people and figuring out who is concerned about this and who is not, that in itself has brought out so many people who are interested in helping us with this issue. And this goes from mom and pop who are concerned about if their grandkids going to play, if their grandkids going to be safe breathing the air in their backyard while they're playing, all the way to people who work for the Illinois Environmental Council. So I think that in terms of growing our membership, so just for example, I started joining, or I started to be involved with politics and such when I was informed that one gentleman was running for, or trying to be placed on the ballot against the incumbent. And I, as little as I knew about politics and as great a disdain as I had for it, I was aware that for one person to run uncontested was just out of the question, undemocratic. So I think that if you were to, look at an issue or a rallying point in your neighborhood, in your community, that you would find, once you began speaking to your neighbors, that they're probably concerned about similar things, whether it be property taxes or violence or closing of schools. A lot of your neighbors, regardless of, whether you do or don't like them or know them, we're concerned about a lot of the same things, A lot of what affects me affects Billy, who lives a couple blocks away. So whether that be ICE raids or informing property owners of trying to pay their taxes, or the environmental justice campaign that we've recently been working on, rallying points are really going to be your big draw of new people.
Well, folks, we could be here all day with the knowledge on the stage, but I want to say thank you for sharing your time and experience with us. You'll be available here for a little while. The contact information for the organizations are online on the online program at civiclab.us, but not the personal information for your speakers. So if you want to grab them now before they have to head off. So let's give them a round of applause to our speakers. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us.